So if you have followed the Alex Murdaugh case at all, you have probably heard about Stephen Smith. So when I took a deep dive into that case, I found some things I never knew. Well, hello, my silky friends. Today we are going to dive into Stephen Smith. And y'all, remember, if you have already taken a deep dive, you might know some of this, but not everybody does. So that is what I'm here to do. I'm going to try to put it together as quickly as I can for you. So let's start with a recap of what happened in 2015.
Stephen Smith was found in the middle of a country road in 2015, and his death was mysterious and suspicious from the very beginning. His family, namely his mother and his twin sister, they didn't buy the whole theory that it was a random hit and run.
High-profile homicide trial of South Carolina lawyer Alex Murdaugh has brought up painful memories of the 2015 hit-and-run death of 19-year-old Stephen Smith. So what's the connection between these two crimes? With a possible link to the Murdaugh family, many now question whether Stephen's death was an accident or if it was yet another mysterious death in the history of the prominent South Carolina legal family. Because of her son's sexuality, his mother, Sandy Smith, thinks her son's death could have been a hate crime, according to South Carolina news outlet Bluffton Today. In 2022, Alex Murdaugh was indicted on 2 counts of murder for the 2021 shooting deaths of his wife and son, Maggie and Paul Murdaugh, on the Murdaugh family's rural South Carolina estate near Charleston. In the investigation of Maggie and Paul's murder, Stephen's 2015 case, ruled at that time an accident, was reopened.
Well, it's not going to bring Stephen back, but I will have a peace of mind to know whoever did this is going to pay.
Smith family attorney Mike Hemlep told People, "Sandy and I both believe that this was a murder. If anyone helped cover up what happened, they should be held accountable." As Bluffton Today goes on to explain, in 2015, Stephen Smith reportedly ran out of gas on the side of the highway. Said to have been walking home at the time, Smith was struck and killed by the mirror of a passing truck that left the scene. According to the coroner's report, his cause of death was severe blunt force trauma to the head. No one was charged with the crime. Sandy Smith found many inconsistencies in the official version of events. If her son had been hit by the mirror of a passing truck, the glass would have shattered, but no shards were found. There were also no skid marks or other signs of an automobile accident. Speaking with Bluffton Today, Sandy said her son was gay, and there were rumors that he was a stalking target. According to Sandy, Stephen's potential relationship with the boy might have played a part in his death. She told the outlet, "I just don't believe my son would have been walking in the middle of the road like that. He would have seen headlights coming and got off the road. It just doesn't make any sense." Sandy alleges his death was murder and said those responsible might have been classmates, adding, "This was a fight that he didn't have a chance to win. I know my son and he was strong. One person didn't do this because Stephen would have fought back." One enduring question about the Stephen Smith reported hit-and-run scene is why Alex Murdaugh and his brother Randy, also a lawyer, were there, having crossed the crime scene tape. The Murdaugh family name was reportedly brought up in the initial investigation into Stephen's death, but those leads were never followed. Randy Murdaugh also reportedly contacted Sandy Smith after the accident to offer his firm's legal services, though the Murdaugh family law firm denies that happened. What Sandy believes might have been the motivation behind Smith's alleged murder was an alleged romantic relationship between her son and another Murdaugh son, Richard Buster Murdaugh, Stephen's classmate. The theory goes that Alex and Randy Murdaugh may have arrived on the scene to cover up Buster's potential involvement, but there's no evidence to support that theory. This motive for the crime has never been explored, and Smith family attorney Mike Hemlep told News Nation there's also no evidence of them ever having had a relationship. Still, for many, a Murdaugh connection can't be ruled out. As Fitz News reporter Will Folks told News Nation, there was clearly a Murdaugh tie into the death of Stephen Smith, because if you read the investigatory reports from his death back in 2015, the Murdaugh name is mentioned dozens of times. Meanwhile, a spokesperson for Randy Murdaugh's law firm told News Nation, "It was clear that this case was not handled correctly. Why? I can't tell you. Maybe it was simply incompetence. Maybe it was purposeful. But I do believe that the truth is going to come out."
Okay, so those are the basic facts. But let's talk a little bit about Stephen's background. And look, this is not a moral judgment program, okay? You can disagree with a lifestyle, but in the end, what is important is getting justice for this young man, no matter what you think, okay? So I don't want to hear any, he deserved it. According to all his friends, Stephen was, kind of just like a bright spot in everybody's life. His mom called him her ray of sunshine. Stephen was smart. He was funny. He was obviously very attractive. And yes, Stephen was gay. And potentially having that orientation in a very small southern town could make people look at you a certain way. But that does not excuse the unaliving of this young man. And this case gets really weird. So let's take a look at some of the things that went on with the coroner.
Now, also in these documents, it says, quote, the coroner stated he had made contact with an MUSC pathologist who said she would be willing to change her report to read however the coroner wanted it, end quote.
I mean, what the what? I mean, seriously? You are going to just write whatever? Mind-blowing to me. But now, let's look at a recent report. This one, y'all, it blew me away, and I'm going to have to edit it a bit, and you'll see why. Okay, there are certain things you can't say. SA is what we have to say on YouTube. So that is what I'm talking about. As you heard them say, why would you even do this kind of kit on a victim of a vehicular accident or hit and run? It makes absolutely no sense. I think this could play, potentially, a big part in the solving of this case. So let's look at a little bit of Stephen's activities. Again, no judgment, just the facts. Stephen was involved in activities that were dangerous. For instance, he was part of an escort service, and because of this, he met many different people. Now, this is something that I found on Reddit by Spider CSP1. No disrespect meant to Stephen Smith, but according to his sister, he was meeting clients from an online escort service. He was also meeting clients on his own through social media. One man he had a meeting with was a wealthy client over by Hilton Head. He was questioned but had an alibi. It's possible that Stephen met another client who is the perpetrator, and the Murdaughs have nothing to do with his death. It seems like the community gossips likes to blame anything on the boogeyman Murdaugh. Yeah, I think that's true, and, this whole trial of Alec Murdaugh's did not put the family in a good light, so there's that. And I also heard an interview with Jessica Smith, who was Stephen's twin, I believe. I heard her say this. Yes, he was meeting clients. So anytime you are, in a lifestyle like that, whether it's hetero or not, you are putting yourself at risk, to say the least, even if they're, wealthy clients. Now remember, Buster Murdaugh is the son of Alex Murdaugh. How did he even get involved in this whole thing? Well, there's a couple of things. One, and I heard this interview a couple of weeks ago, that actually Buster and Stephen had kind of I wouldn't call it a friendship, like a bud's friendship, but that Stephen did help him with some studying and some homework and stuff like that, because Stephen was a very smart kid. And, I guess Buster just had other things to do. I don't know. They went to high school together, and so, as far as anyone can tell, there was no, hatred or any kind of stuff like that going on between the two. But now this is after graduation. And the number one thing that actually connected these two was that the police found something when they were investigating the unaliving of Maggie and Paul, which was Buster's mother and brother. Something in that investigation of the property, I'm assuming, put a link back to Stephen Smith. Because in 2021, nobody was investigating Stephen Smith's unaliving. It was noted to be a hit and run, and that was that, even though there were so many things to the contrary. Now, no one but law enforcement knows what that link is and, how strong it is. Now, after they reopened the case, and I think probably especially since the Murdaugh family was not so popular anymore, and it looked like Alex was going to be going to prison, which he did, people began to talk. I guess they felt more comfortable and, no retribution. They were a really big fish and a really tiny town. They can completely ruin your life if they want to in a situation like that. And if you've never lived in a town like that, then, just shh, because it's the truth. Now, I listened to a lot of Buster's friends that were kind of, character witnesses for him, saying Buster wasn't like that. He had no beef with Stephen, and, they never heard anything about it. Now, Buster was a party boy, okay, as was his brother Paul. Were they engaging in a lot of, activity of different kinds? Yes. His friend said to harm Stephen would have been completely out of character. Now, let's just say this. If, as some rumors, and these are rumors, not facts, but if some of these are true, then Buster may have been using substances of one kind or another that can completely destroy your judgment and what you think you're doing. And you know what I'm saying? If there were some illicit substances involved, could he have done something? It's possible. It's possible for the nicest person in the world to do something horrendous under the influence of a, substance. Now, since all this has come up, Buster has come out with a statement saying that, he had nothing to do with it. Of course, he extends, his condolences to the family. What else can he say? At this point, it doesn't lean towards guilt or innocence. It's just kind of trying to put a statement out there because people are talking. But now let's talk about something else I didn't know. Jessica Smith says that at Stephen's funeral, this guy comes up. He's in his 40s. His name is Mark, and he claims to have had a relationship with Stephen. And at the funeral, he admits that he was on the phone with Stephen a couple of times that night. He knew that Stephen was working for an escort service, and I don't know what kind of relationship they had. That would not be okay with me, but whatever. And I guess that part didn't bother him as much, but he had, cautioned Stephen about using Craigslist because it is very dangerous. At least with an escort service, somebody knows where you are and who you're supposed to be with. But he did say that Stephen, against advice, was putting ads on Craigslist. As alleged by Mark, Stephen was meeting a client over in the Hilton Head area, and I don't know what happened, if, everything was just over and he was going home and he ran out of gas. But Stephen had also said that he was being harassed at a local store by some guys in a truck. And Mark says he could actually hear the truck in the background. And so Stephen was kind of disconcerted, I guess, a little bit by that. Now, did these people follow him? I don't know. But then there is a whole nother suspect. And this is, again, just theory. There was an officer, Ginn, who was talking to one of the investigators. And, okay, this is going to be crazy. This is so typical South. It's like my mama's cousins, dogs, friends, goldfish, whatever. It happens, okay? It's hot down here. We go a little bit nuts. Officer Ginn had an ex-stepdad named Daryl. Daryl was dating a woman who had a son named Patrick. So Patrick one day tells Daryl, he's saying that his friend Sean, are you following me here? Ginn to Daryl to Patrick to Sean. I might need an aspirin after this. Sean calls Patrick as their friends, and actually Sean and Patrick were friends of some of the Murdaughs and their friends. So this wasn't an outside circle. But Sean says that he was driving down this same road and he was intoxicated with something, and he said he hit something and he just kept going. So he calls Patrick and confesses to him. He's all upset and crying, and then he goes back the next day to kind of see what happened, and he saw police all around the area. Now, Patrick tells Daryl, and Daryl tells Officer Ginn. Why these people are telling everybody, I don't know. So then they kind of think, well, maybe it was a hit and run. But no, let's go back to the coroner's report. And just recently, they have changed this whole hit and run to officially being a homicide. So I don't know what Sean hit, if that's even a true story, because there's a lot of theories about coercion, all of that stuff. So I don't know if it's a bunch of hooey or not. It certainly does mess up the stew pot. But now, another thing to consider, just throwing this out there, where Stephen's body was found was a mile from the McMillan farm. It was a big, prosperous farm where Sean spent a lot of time working on that farm because the farm was owned by his grandfather. Now, that does not in any way say that Sean was involved or that any of this story is true, okay? Because really all we have is a phone call and he said, the officer said. But it could put Sean out there that night. However, again, it is clear that this was not a hit and run. Again, because there were no skid marks, there was no spatter of the red stuff, and there were no car parts like on the road or in the grass or whatever. Like, you're going to hit somebody and do that much damage, then you're going to lose part of your car, okay? So to me, that makes it pretty questionable. So where are we today? Well, Stephen Smith's mom has now raised enough money to pay for an exhumation of the body and a new autopsy. Now, the only thing preventing that is that it has to be signed off by a judge, the court. They have to agree to let this happen. It does take time to go through court, so that is what we're waiting on. Also, I have no idea what the results of the SA kit that they did years ago showed. Did they find DNA? Because that would at least link someone to a timeline. Not necessarily just because they had a relationship with Stephen are they the perpetrator, but it might add some insight as to what Stephen may have said, in conversation that was going on at that time. The big problem with this case right now is that everyone is linking it to Buster. I would say it could be a group effort of, let's all jump on Murdaugh because they are, were tyrants to the community and they did all this bad stuff. Now they're going down, so let's just all jump in there and accuse them of everything. Could that happen? Absolutely. So the one thing that is going to link Buster to this case is what they found at the farm when investigating his mom and brother. Because the rest of it at this point is rumors and hearsay. Now, there was at least one person that said they were an eyewitness to this. But again, nobody has done an affidavit. Nobody has put themselves on the line and said, yes, I was there and this is what happened. And honestly, there could have been a lot of different answers for this because of the risks that Stephen was taking at that time. Now, if you want to take a real big deep dive into this, I would suggest going to a channel called Eric Allen, A-L-A-N. He goes into a lot of depth, and if you want to hear these interviews between different people, then he has them all. He does a great job. I'm just trying to get the basic details for you and then keep up with what is going on. And again, just putting it out there, the more pressure that you put on law enforcement, the courts, or whatever to keep it in the public eye, the better chance that you are going to actually find answers and get justice. Again, I don't care what your feelings are on Stephen Smith. This was someone who did not deserve injustice, nor does anybody, okay? That's my opinion, and I am sticking to it. And comment below if you want to hear more about Stephen Smith, because I do have a lot of papers and stuff we could go over, but I am going to be keeping up with this case. Anyway, I hope you have a great week, and whatever you do, just stay silky.